Hello, one and all, and welcome to the podcast we call the Fantastival with myself, Steve Nussbaum, in the podcast where I invite my guests to come on, talk to me all about their musical tastes, their memories, their experiences, and I get to collect their fantasy festivals, which I have christened Fantastivals. We are now on number 148 as we move towards the end of 2023. What a fantastic year it's been. And before we start this one, just want to say a huge thank you to Mr. Sam Sherdell for coming on the podcast last week. A great guest, such a talented guy. His tunes are amazing. So if you've not listened to any of his stuff or his podcast, please go back and have a listen to Sam. He was a great guest, great lineup, funny chap as well, and a few F-bombs in there for you. So really enjoyable episode. And this week I'm going to mention, actually, if you get a chance and you enjoy the podcast, don't forget to rate the show on Spotify or review us on iTunes. The kind of feedback on those platforms has dried up a little bit. So if you're listening on those platforms and if you're kind enough, I would love a review from you all. So that's enough of the plugging of the past. All about the future now. And it's time to introduce the guests on the 148th episode of this podcast. And this week we are going international, and I'm delighted to be joined by this gent, the man behind the Record Citizens label. Ladies and gentlemen, it's Mr. Stephen Brown.
Hello, how are you doing?
All good, Stephen. I'm so glad we're getting to catch up, and what a great time to do so. I'm looking forward to hearing all about your musical tastes, your fantasy festival, and all about Record Citizens. But before we do, I always like to check in with my guests to make sure they're doing well from a mental health perspective. So to start off with, Stephen, mate, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well. I'm excited to be here, and things are looking good. So yeah, let's get into it. I'm really excited.
Great stuff. You're wearing a Skylights t-shirt. I know it's going to be a great podcast already. Anyone wearing a Skylights t-shirt is good in my books.
Yeah, I was inspired by obviously by Turn on the show like 2 weeks ago, and I was thinking about that, and then I thought about a vacation that I went on. I went to Mexico. So I went to Mexico. I sat in the chair, having a few drinks, and it's a young couple, 30s, sitting next to me, and the missus had a Leeds United football backpack. And I thought, oh, that's great. You don't see a lot of, British people down in Mexico all the time, especially from Leeds. And, I wanted to ask them about the Skylights. And, have you heard of them? They're a great band. Do you like them? And the guy told me, he said, I don't think I've heard of them. And I don't listen to a lot of music. And I thought, what's my luck? I'm on vacation. I'm sitting with a guy from Leeds. He has no idea who the Skylights are. So, I wanted to start playing them on my phone. And, he really wasn't all that interested. So I have to say, the conversation sort of tapered off after that, sort of went downhill. But just thinking about that today, I said, you know what? I got to wear my Skylights t-shirt. So I'm wearing it. Turn, if you're listening, we love the Skylights and everything you guys are doing. So just want to say that right now.
Yeah, great shout. Looking forward to see what the future holds for Skylights. They've been hinting at new material coming very early 2024. So looking forward to that. So Stephen, I introduced you as the man behind the Record Citizens label. I'm sure as we are here, there's more to you than that. So I know you live in Canada. I know you spent a lot of time in the UK previously. I know you're 52. But tell us a bit more about yourself before we go into all about your musical kind of life. So who is the man? Who is Stephen Brown?
Oh, well, I'm a dad, a music collector, a music enthusiast. I've been collecting music and listening to music probably since 1980, since probably I was 9-10 years old. And, there's always music around the house. My parents had a good record collection. They always had a turntable. There was always a big stack of cassettes. My dad was always blasting music in the car. And I think that, sort of influenced me a little bit to get involved in music, and started, really collecting music from a very early age. Probably, I really think 1979, 1980 was listening to music. Probably 1980, 81, we were out listening to the English Beat. We were listening to the Jam. We were listening to, I was listening to Sex Pistols even in, grade 6. we were living in the US at that time. And at that time, there was a lot of great music around. There was, radio stations that played music. And so I've kind of developed a lifelong love and passion for music, and from the point of view of always on the hunt, always looking for something new. Always, and my tastes are, it's not just indie, it's everything from, soul to jazz to rock to indie music to everything I can find, but it's got to have a great beat.
That's the thing, right?
That's the most important thing. I'm interested in the beat.
Do you play drums at all? Are you like a drummer in your spare time or anything like that?
No. I played bass when I was younger,
right?
And it sounded like shit. Don't worry, it sounded horrible. and luckily for everyone, I gave it up and just became a collector.
So I guess you've spoken about collecting music. I guess was the plan always to try and be involved in music in some capacity at some stage in your life?
Yeah, it always was. And, I got involved in my teens DJing. I've got a couple of Techniques turntables, and I've had them for 30 years, and I've been DJing and, here and there when I was younger, when I had more time. And I was always involved in writing music reviews when I was younger as well. And then all of that I got married, had a couple of kids. I think I've heard that a few times on your show as well.
Yeah.
And, things kind of settled into a bit of a hiatus. I wasn't really too involved, still buying music and, playing records at home, but I wasn't really very involved. I didn't have very many connections with people. And that sort of lasted for a while. And then I have to say, during lockdown and COVID, and I got more involved in listening to more music again because I had more time. And so maybe that 1 hour that I was listening to music became, 2, 3, 4 hours. I wasn't at work anymore. It was on in the background. So then, I started getting involved. I was on Twitter, I was looking for bands, kind of correlating between, music that I heard on Spotify and then, posts from bands and new music and record stores and labels, and just sort of putting it all together and sort of getting back into it and, remembering, why I was there in the first place, and really became very excited again about music. And, the kids were a little bit older, so Dad had more time. And so I was able to sort of get back into it. I started, writing some reviews. Bands started posting them and sort of being interested in what I was doing. And a few bands reached out to me and said, hey, would you mind doing a review? And I had plenty of time, so I did it. And that's sort of really, there's some positive things that happened during lockdown. There's some horrible things that happened, but for me, it certainly brought me back into music, and I got more grounded in music again, and was able to find my feet and remember, why I got back into it in the first place.
And you mentioned, I guess, getting involved, in the new music scene in terms of social media. I think the Twitter new music scene is so welcoming and so friendly, and there's loads of great new bands, I guess, to immerse yourself in. Yeah,
and you can spend hours, and believe me, my wife has called me out for doing that. And you can spend hours doing it and communicating with people, and it's obviously an incredible community, and I know everyone says that, and I can't say it enough. And very welcoming, and everyone's very supportive and very collaborative of what we're doing, and it's not just the bands, the supporters, labels, record stores. I think everyone has time for everyone, and everyone is very positive, and you really know who those people are. You can easily see that, and really, even if it's electronic, you can certainly feel it. And I think that's really special, and I think that's something that came out of COVID. And I think that's something unfortunately, Twitter, or X as it's called now, is sort of gone downhill a bit. Some people have said I'm shouting into the void. Is anyone listening? And well, a lot of people are still around. People are listening, but many people are back to work. We don't have the time. But there's a really strong community that's still out there pushing new music. They're there every week. Friday's a great day. Friday's a big day. It's Release Radar Day. That's everyone's got to put out their favorite song that day. Everyone piles on. Have you heard this? This one's out. This one's coming out, and Friday's a great day. I always look forward to Fridays.
Highlight of the week.
Yeah, that's the best day of the week.
So it's one thing, I guess, being involved in the community, and it's one thing, I guess, writing reviews. It can take a while, but I guess it's the next step or something further is starting up a label, right? So you obviously started Record Citizens. What, I guess, gave you the impetus or the idea to do that? Was there a turning point where you thought, actually, this is what I want to do and this is how I want to contribute?
I think, again, lockdown sort of came and I got back into music, in a different way, in more of a deeper way. And I really thought that this is what I've always been interested in. I'm sitting on 5,000 records here at home. And that's always, that's not the biggest collection in the world, but it's not the smallest collection in the world. But I personally think every record is incredible. And so that sort of brought me back to what I've always been interested in. I've always been interested in music. And I've got records that go all the way back to, 79, 80 that I went out and, with my allowance from my father purchased. And so I thought, I've always been inspired by the whole, DIY ethic of independent music, whether it's, going all the way back to the punk era and all the way up to today. And there's plenty of bands out there that are releasing their own music. Shed Project are releasing their own music. They've got a great album that's coming out on Friday. If anyone's listening, get it. It's fantastic. And I've always been inspired by that. And so, truthfully speaking, there was a small property in my family that we've had for a very long time, and we were able to sell it recently in the last year and a half. And I decided to take a part of that money, it's a small part of it, and put it towards following this sort of passion and this sort of dream of being able to actually create something physical. And that's what really led me to really say, look, there's all this great independent music out there. It exists in the digital world. Some of it exists in the physical world. Some of it exists with CDs, which, are a good medium, but it doesn't, in my opinion, at least for me, and I think for a lot of people, it doesn't hold that same passion, that same electricity, that same excitement of holding a piece of vinyl, that of taking it out, of looking at the liner notes, of holding it. And it's big, you're holding it in your hands. It's this big thing, and the idea that you have this tiny little needle and this incredible music that comes up from it that takes you everywhere, and it gives you every feeling that you want to feel. And as I say, when I grew up, I didn't really have a whole lot of friends. I was kind of a quiet guy. I was kind of a shy guy. Music was always there. It always made me feel great. It always picked me up. It was always in the background. It gave me something to do. And in a lot of ways, it gave me a lot of purpose in life. And it really helped me. It's always helped me. It's always been there. All the way for the last 40 plus years that I've been involved in, and that's really how it all came about. And I thought, I would like to do something, and I thought that in the digital age, when people are working by emails, and you don't have to be physically present in Middlesbrough or in Derby to go talk to Press on Vinyl. You can send them an email. You can use WeTransfer. You can get files. And you can have a sound engineer, master, not sort of master them, but master all the levels so they all sound great. And all this can be done virtually and without really a strong, physical presence, but with just your passion and just saying, I want to make this happen. And if you're willing to put the time in to communicate to people, to connect with people, to say, here's what I want to do, here's how we're going to do it. We've got the website designers in Oxford, very close to where I used to live in Reading. The graphic designer for the albums is in Bournemouth. We're selling our records through the very fantastic Wax and Beans team in Bury. It's being pressed at Press on Vinyl in Derby. Right? Is it Derby or Middlesbrough? I think it's Middlesbrough. And of all those connections, I'm here. And yeah, I was in the UK in May. But even before that, I was able to do all those things remotely and just with time and energy and, contacting people in a very respectful way and saying, here's what I'd like to do. Would you like to be a part of it? And really, it's taken off, really.
Incredible.
And I'm very excited about it. And it is actually really incredible. I still sometimes look at the records and I say, wow, this was an idea when I was driving down the road about 15 months ago.
That's incredible. Great
story. And here we are today. I'm on your amazing podcast. Who would have thought that,
You made it.
I made it. But you finally noticed me.
So you mentioned you was in the UK in May, right? So that was for the release of the first Indie Citizens compilation. I guess, how did you find that whole experience? And I guess, were you surprised with the reception and reaction?
Yeah, I was surprised. First, I was surprised that anybody wanted to talk to me in the first place. And after people wanted to talk to me, I was surprised that people were actually interested in getting involved. And I was surprised at how interested people were to work with us, how incredible it was, to talk to Ben at Wax and Beans, and how to finally get up there and just to actually walk into the store and feel like I'd been there before. And everyone just said, "Oh, Steve's here," and it was just fantastic. I showed up on the day that the vinyl arrived. I sat at one of their tables. I hand numbered all the vinyl. We had Marseille from Derby come in and do an acoustic show. We had Ruby J come in and do an acoustic show as well as a launch party that night, that Thursday night, I think on May 5th. And it was fantastic. It was incredible. It was the best experience I've had in a really long time. And and to say, that everyone was so welcoming and supportive. It was really an incredible feeling. Really, it was an incredible feeling. I can't put it into more words than that.
And the big follow-up to the first one, it comes out, well, by the time this podcast goes out, it would have just come out on vinyl, right? So tell us a bit about, I guess, the second edition, who's on it, your hopes for it, and how this
the second edition, as I say, this show will be out on Sunday, and I'm very hopeful that the great folks at Wax and Beans will have the shipment by Friday. And I hope very much that they'll start shipping it, and people will be receiving it on Monday, Tuesday of this week. And it was so great. The first one, I really thought, can we do it again? Is there really enough interest in it? And surprisingly enough, there was more interest in it. More people knew about it than I actually thought knew about it. It really sort of just said, well, maybe I should do it again. We talked to a couple of people, and that'd be great. You should do it. And so sort of one thing led to another. And I really think we've got an incredible lineup. We've got some exclusive songs that you're not going to hear anywhere yet. We've got some songs that are going to be, that have just been released as singles, and we've got some tracks that hopefully will become singles in the new year. And everything from it's really a wide spectrum of the whole indie scene. And this time I think it worked better because it was already a bit more established. It wasn't an idea anymore. We could point to the fact and say, hey, we've already done it the first time. You can go to the store, you can buy it. Lots of people have it. I love seeing people posting it. It makes me feel so good to see it on people's turntables. It's just a fantastic feeling that, they're actually enjoying something that I created in partnership with all the other bands and artists and all the other people that I've just mentioned. And it really is an incredible feeling. And so we did it the second time, and we've just got some amazing songs on there. And I hope I don't really forget everyone, but a great unreleased track that came out of the Shed Project's second album recording sessions that didn't make it on the album, but made it on our compilation. An unreleased Jay Tennant track. Somebody said the other day, Jay Tennant is a national treasure. And I absolutely agree. Jay Tennant is a national treasure. He's great. He's fantastic. Everything from really new indie, from bands like The Forensics, Mies. Let's see who else is on there. The SRB, the Holy Coves, this is a track that came off their first album. Fantastic group from Wales. Marseille came back to give us a new single off their new EP. The first single off Ruby J's new EP is on there. And The Shop Window, a slice of jangle pop heaven that is coming off their new double album. What balls these guys are going to produce a double album next year? And that's coming out sometime next year, but that's an amazing track. That's just a fantastic track. We've got a track on there from a new version from the Milltown Brothers. Talk about going back in time to late 90s Manchester with the Milltown Brothers. Well, fantastic. Super 8, a great guy from Scotland, is on there with a special remixed version of a single of his. So it's just some really fantastic music. And we've got this really great little outro from the Teenage Waitress. I don't know if you know Daniel, the Teenage Waitress.
Daniel has been on this very podcast. Yes, Daniel's done this podcast. Lovely chap.
Oh, he's lovely, and I really like Daniel. I really feel very connected with him, and I really like a comment he made. Up the weirdo pop, and I think he very much sees himself as that sort of weird artistic alchemist of the Teenage Waitress. Blending different styles, because you listen to Your Cuckoo, and I had it on again the other day, and there's just so much different styles. You listen to Gray Skies, and it's almost an electronic track, and then you listen to others that are very they're just like a really interesting ballad. So we've got a really great 58-second outro on side B of the Teenage Waitress. So I hope you listen to that. It's really exciting. But it has been a great journey with Volume 2 as well, and we've had a lot of great support. We had we were on A.D. Hanson's Windrush radio show. We had a listening party. We had introductions from all the artists. A quick little introduction with myself, and A.D. played the album from start to finish. It was fantastic. It was really great just to hear it from start to finish with all the introductions. I really do want to shout out people like Scott, who you had on, just 2 shows ago. Scott's a great guy, always supporting the album, talking about it. To Daff in Scotland, who does music reviews for upcoming bands. He reviewed every single track on the album. Wow. Every week, a new review for 12 weeks. And, it's just incredible that people want to get involved. It's, the response has blown me away. The interest that people have to support it is phenomenal. That's as much as I can say about it.
Yeah, can't wait to listen. You've mentioned some fantastic acts, and I look really forward to hearing it in full. So as well as, I guess, the compilations, you do have 2 other albums by solo act. So tell us about Luca. So Luca, I've said that right, haven't I?
Yeah, Luca's a fantastic artist. He's from Brixton. He lives in Paris. He's just a whirlwind of music. He works with DJ Soap, DJ Son of a Pitch in Paris, who sort of acts as his DJ beat producer. It's amazing music. And we released Friday Night Rockstar last year at the end of the year. This year, over the summer, we released the follow-up to that, which is called Boom Bap for Boomers, on Halloween orange vinyl. And I would describe Luca as sort of an electro mashup artist. You'll find everything on there, from drum and bass styles to hip hop to electronic to really sort of. He's got a sort of a reggae dancehall cover on the new album. It's not a cover, a collaboration on the new album. And there's just a lot of great music on there. I think Luca is in a little bit of a category all of his own. And the fact that he trusted me enough to work with me, and we worked together to be able to release this album. And obviously shout out to the great folks at Wax and Beans for all their great promotion and carrying it and fulfilling the orders for us. But yeah, that's been a great experience as well. And, really, I think Luca's an underrated artist. I think he's going to be discovered as a musical genius for some of the music that they've put out. And if you haven't heard him, I would say go out and listen to those records, because I think you'll be blown away by what's on there. And I think, people, when people hear it, whether it's, the folks at Wax and Beans or Scotty or others, people like A.D., everyone says it's incredible music. I think it needs to be shouted far and wide, and I'm always shouting about Luca, or I'm always trying to.
Do you know what? I know I didn't think I knew who it was, but of course I do. I've heard the Friday Night album. That's a good album. I've heard it. I was getting thrown. I thought he was Scottish for some reason. So when you say he's from Brixton, I couldn't place him, but I know exactly who you're talking about now.
Yeah, if you see the Friday Night Rockstar album, It is Luca. He's a musical terrorist. And that's exactly what he is. The music will terrorize you, and you will fall in love with it, and you will buy the vinyl. Believe me, you will. I know you will.
So if anyone's listening and doesn't have the vinyl, right, and he gets into Luca, whether that's streaming or whatever, where's the best place for someone to go and buy the comps or the Luca albums? Where would you recommend someone goes to pick those up?
No, exclusively at Wax and Beans. And that sort of leads me into, once again, I want to thank, Ben, Lou, Steve, all the other great people at Wax and Beans who do what they do. And it's an incredible music store, from the in-stores that they do to the out-stores that they do. Trampoline Band was there, 2 days ago for an acoustic show. And I just saw Glenn Matlock is going to perform there.
Oh, wow.
And I think do a Q&A. I'm not sure if there's a book signing involved. This is coming up next year. There's always an incredible show happening at Wax and Beans. They're always out there promoting music. They did all the fulfillment for the new Apollo Junction album. They did all the fulfillment for the new Heavy North album. They're doing all the fulfillment for the Shed Project album and tons of other ones. But these are just the ones that happened in the last week. So what I really have to say, what they're doing and how they're supporting bands and music and the independent scene is phenomenal. That's hands down. That's it. They're the best.
Yeah, congratulations to them. That's a hell of an achievement. So at the moment, there's loads of great new music out. By the time this goes out, that new Shed Project album that you mentioned would have been released. I'm looking forward to hearing that. The singles so far have been fantastic. I'm still listening to the Skylights album, so I'm very late to the Skylights party, but I'm absolutely loving that album still. And I still can't quite get over the Blink-182 album, which is taking me back to my youth. That new album's fantastic. Steve, what are you listening to at the moment? Anything on your headphones or on your streaming or on your record player at the moment that you're listening to, whether that's old or whether that's new? What are you listening to at the moment?
I'm really listening to, I've always got, a dozen albums on order. I'm waiting for the postman to arrive with the new Shed Project record. I know it's going to be a couple days delayed getting over here, but I've always got a ton of new music coming in, and really I've been listening to a lot the new Apollo Junction album, the new Heavy North album. I'm going back listening to Phaser Days. I've been listening to what else? Let me try to remember. I've been listening to a lot of Native Language. Have you heard of these guys? Sort of an electronic group. They've got a companion to their first album coming out. I've been listening to Bleach Lab. I'm really enjoying them. They just had a great tour in the UK. I've really been listening to She's in Parties. They were on tour with Bleach Lab as well. As I say, Phaser Days, somebody that I really love. Who else is coming? There's got to be more coming. But that's just a sample. I mean, it's always changing. And as I say, with so many records, sometimes I just get into the mood that I've got to go back and listen to something. And sometimes it's a Smith's bootleg morning. Sometimes it is. Yesterday I had the Libertines on in the morning, and actually one thing that I really did love that I just acquired was the new Yusuf Day's album, Black Classical Music. I don't know if you're familiar with that one, but he's from London, and it's a great jazz fusion album, a double album on white vinyl. Really fantastic music. He's on tour right now in the United States. I've been listening to the new Balthus album, which is sort of a Colombian trio, sort of psychedelic, trippy jazz kind of music, I guess you could say. So yeah, there's a lot of great stuff out there, and I'm just obviously blown away by how much there is, and my bank account is hurting because of how much I want it. So let's say, but it's like I say, it's some days the music strikes me. This morning, when I was thinking about the festival, I went back and started going through the bins and thinking, how does this work? And what would I like to see? And I just came across the Trash Can Sinatras, and I'd forgotten about them. And I said, man, I haven't listened to Cake in years. I've got to get this out. Every time I go to the wall and start looking at music, something just comes out. I just have to get it.
I love it.
Oh yeah.
That's the beauty of music, right? That's the beauty, and I guess that's the beauty of doing the podcast, which is why I enjoy people talking about music so much, because it makes them go back into their archives and gives them that feeling when they might have been younger, or maybe were into a different album that they haven't listened to in years. So I guess talking about stuff you haven't listened to in years, I always like my guests to reveal their very first album or their first single and what that was when they bought that. I know you mentioned you were a very cool kid listening to the Sex Pistols, but do you remember buying your first single or album and what that was?
I'm really trying to remember, and I'm going back, and I really feel like it might have been the English beat. I really think that one was it. I remember back, obviously we're going back to 79, and there was always a lot of music around. And I remember, New Wave came, and, I did buy Billy Idol. I have to admit it. Generation X was on, Billy Idol was on. I remember getting the Sex Pistols album when I was younger. I remember, buying the English Beat album. There was a lot of great music, and of course, we couldn't really see any of it, because number one, we were young, and number two, we lived in America. None of these bands were, touring California at that time, which is where my parents happened to live. My dad worked there, and so in that way, we started off, with sort of the new wave invasion, if you will, in the early '80s, and that sort of set the stage, I think, for what came later. And at that time, the internet wasn't around, streaming wasn't around. There was not really a lot of ways for us to listen to music, and I wasn't listening to ZZ Top, let's put it that way, and I wasn't listening to Aerosmith, and so there's a lot of things that are on the radio that I wasn't interested in. But in school there were people that were interested in what I was interested in, and things like this sort of late 70s, early 80s, new wave kind of post-punk music. But we were always on the hunt, and you had to hunt for music, and you couldn't just, walk into a record store. A lot of times you had to order something, you had to figure out what it was, and, finding things, like New Music Express and compilations that came out. And so for a long time, for a good, 15 years, magazines and compilations were the only way to really do anything, the only way to find out anything. And a funny story I would say about the Smiths were in Newsweek magazine. Newsweek magazine, have you heard of that one?
Yeah.
So my dad had a subscription to Newsweek magazine, and I happened to be flipping through it one day, and I think this was after just when Meat is Murder was out. And so I missed the first album, Que Sera Sera. So I missed the first one, and Meat is Murder was out, and they had this, 4 or 5 page article about the Smiths, and I thought, well, this is great. Who's this band? And I went out and found them, and immediately fell in love with the Smiths, and just that led into other things like The Cure and the Jesus and Mary chain and things like that, and everything has been sort of from one connection to another connection, I would say from 1980 all the way up to today. And of course, today it's much easier. You can just log into Twitter and you can find 10 new bands, hopefully in a matter of minutes. But back then it really was a hunt, and compilation CDs were really important, especially when CDs came out. There were some compilation 7 inches that came out. I found, I was down in the stacks, as I told you, I found a 7-inch compilation, and on one side was the Smiths' William It Was Really Nothing, and Lloyd Cole and the Commotion's Perfect Skin. And the date on that was 1983. And I think I remember getting that around 83 or 84, finding that, and that was, pretty fantastic. But I've kept it all these years, and I played it the other day, and it sounds phenomenal. Incredible. But those were the things. And someone was talking about Oasis. Tern was talking about his sister's Oasis tapes, and I remember hearing Oasis on a compilation before the first album came out, before Be Here Now would have came out, the first one, before Supersonic was released as a single. They were on a compilation, and that's how I found out about them. And so that's why I think, I can go back. I went back, I found a Deep Heat compilation from the 80s. And, not the 80s, the 90s, sorry, the late 90s. On it was The Farm, MC Tunes, and 808 State. I said, yeah, this is why I bought this.
Yeah.
So I hope that, some people out there might get the compilation, and they might say, I knew this band, I knew that band. I didn't know these 5, and these 3 are brilliant. I'm going to go out and find out more about them. So that's what I hope happens. I hope people love it as much to do that.
You've completed the loop perfectly. You've explained the compilation aspect really well, actually. That's a really good way that you've looped it back to kind of yourself there. So this pod, as I'm sure you're aware, is all about getting our guests to collate their fantasy festivals. Steve, you've obviously told me you live in Reading. You've been to many festivals. Are you a fan of the festival?
Yeah, I like festivals. I've been to, Reading obviously a few times. I lived there. In the U.S., been to Coachella a few times. Been to Lollapalooza early Lollapaloozas when I was younger. Had some great experiences. I saw the Jesus and Mary Chain and Lush at Lollapalooza. Seeing the Beastie Boys at Lollapalooza was phenomenal. And I've had the opportunity to do some international traveling. And, when I was in Chile at one point, I was able to see Morrissey, New Order, and who else did I see? Oh, Happy Mondays, all in Chile.
Wow.
And that was a fantastic event. And, it was great to see Bez down there. And great to see Morrissey at the Viña del Mar Festival. So, if there's music around, I'll try and find it. I'll seek it out and I'll look for it. And yeah, it's been great. It has been great. I really do want to get back to the UK again and plan a month and see, a number of different festivals over, 4 weeks. And I know I can do it. I just got to get back and do it. So hopefully that'll happen really soon.
Coming to the UK in the summer very soon, by the sounds of it.
Yeah, I think so. I think summer of 24 could be a good trip.
Well, look forward to seeing you if that happens. All right, so let's do the Fantasy Festival. So like I said at the top of the podcast, this is all about getting our guests to collate their Fantasy Festival. So Steve gets to collate his Fantasy Festival. So for any first-time listeners, 5 acts in 5 time slots. Very easy. So like I mentioned at the top of the pod, I had Sam Sherdell on. He created his Malmesbury Fantasy Festival in our last episode. For his opening act, he picked The Vines. Super Seconds, making his first ever appearance on the podcast, unbelievably, was Billy Joel. So great to have Billy Joel on our roster. In his Midway Madness slot, he picked David Bowie and had him play his Black Star album in full. Pre-headline, Sam picked Paolo Nutini. And for his headliner, he picked Pulp, again making their first Fantastival appearance, and had all 5 of his acts come together to close his Fantastival by playing The Streets Are Ours by Richard Hawley. So a very, very simple concept. So Stephen, before we collate your Fantasy Festival, we need to give your Fantasy Festival a name and we need to give it a venue. So Steve, what are you going to call your Fantasy Festival?
Well, I really thought about it, and preparing for this sort of brought me back, to being much younger, to, the time when I lived in California, and really the music that I was listening to that, of course, I could never see. And I have never seen these bands, by the way. And actually, no, I have seen one. I have to admit I've seen one. So I wanted to have a show at the Hollywood Palladium, which I've been to a few times. And we wanted to call it Stranger Sounds from the Underground.
Okay.
At the Hollywood Palladium.
Perfect. Okay, so Stranger Sounds from the Underground.
Mm-hmm. Stranger Sounds from the Underground.
Love it. Okay, great title. Great venue as well. So I guess before we talk about the 5 acts, you've mentioned so many acts already. This must have been quite a hard process for you. Are there any acts who you want to mention who you love but aren't making it into your Stranger Sounds from the Underground Fantasy Festival?
Yeah, that didn't make it. It was so difficult because I started going through the stacks and I started pulling out things. Oh, but this will be good. That will be good. This will be good. That will be good. And so many things that I hadn't really listened to for a little while, and that just kind of brought me back to being so much younger and at those really exciting days of hunting for music. And I stopped on Dexy's Midnight Runners. I have to say, I stopped on Echo and the Bunnymen. I was thinking about Madness. I thought about when I was really into two-tone and listening to the Specials. And I found a very old bootleg green vinyl 7-inch of the Pogues.
Wow.
And I really thought to put the Pogues in. I've seen them live without Shane, unfortunately. That was a time when Shane wasn't with the Pogues. I think they kicked him out and, for obvious reasons, and unfortunately. And so those are some of the groups that really what I thought about. Then I started thinking about, Manchester and the Laws and others. I started thinking about Lush and Slow Dive and Ride and just so many that, it's the combinations are endless, really. But in the end, I decided that, I wanted to get back to that sort of younger, edgier, maybe a little darker sound that I was listening to when I was younger, when you might have seen me wearing, combat boots.
Huh.
When you might have seen me wearing a Green Army jacket with a number of patches all over it. And so, excuse me. So yeah, that's where we are. So if we're ready for the opener, let's go.
Yeah, so, I mean, you mentioned some fantastic bands who haven't made it. I dare say if you do get to the UK for the summer of 2024, you might see a few of those bands who you've mentioned. Like, they're all pretty much all still going in some form and shape and capacity. So, some great acts aren't making it. It's time to do the ones who are. So, 2 o'clock at the Hollywood Palladium. Lovely day. Time for your opening act, Steve. So, who's going to open Stranger Sounds from the Underground?
Well, I thought XTC, and I really thought, they were a great opening act, great music, Skylarking, from, what was it, 1986, I think, was an incredible album. Dear God, all the controversy that surrounded that. But again, going back to their earlier stuff, like, Senses Working Overtime, Making Plans for Nigel, a band that I've never seen, but I would, just love to see. What I would just love to see. And I can remember all the controversy, around Dear God, and, people were talking about burning their records. I think they did burn a few in the United States, and, they were banned for a while. You couldn't listen to XTC on the radio. And I had a copy. I've still got a copy downstairs of Skylarking. I've got a Canadian copy that has Dear God on it, because Skylarking didn't have Dear God in the UK. It was released as a single, but not on the album. And in North America, it was released on the album, so I've got a copy of that.
Great shout. So XTC have been picked before Fantasy Festival. So second time they've been picked. They were picked by Andy Anderson. That feels like ages ago. And he picked them as an opening act as well. So XTC, great for an open act. They're going to play from 2 till 3. We'll take a half-hour break. That takes us to 3:30. And it'll be time for your Super Seconds act, Stephen. So who are you going to have follow XTC and your Super Seconds act?
The English Beat.
Okay. All right.
So the English Beat, in the 80s English Beat, with full of energy, just stomping up there, from playing songs like Tears of a Clown and, Hands Off She's Mine. We were really big into ska and two-tone music in 82, 83. Lots of black brogues, white socks, and, jeans rolled up. We were really into that. That was something special. That was our uniform in 1981, 1982, for sure. So I saw the English Beat later in the 90s. It was sort of a bit nostalgic. I would have loved to have seen them when I was younger, and that's really what the whole festival for me is, to go back to who would I have seen if I could have seen at that time. And definitely I would have liked to have seen the English Beat. It would have been, phenomenal. All
right. So they're coming to your Fantasy Festival. They're also making their first appearance on the Fantastival Podcast. And the English Beat are playing from 3:30 to 4:30. We'll take another half-hour break. Then it'll be time for your Midway Madness act, who gets to play from 5 till 6. So, Stephen, a great first two acts. Who are you going to have play from 5 till 6?
Let's go up to Manchester with the Chameleons.
Okay, great shout. So, Why the Chameleons for you, Stephen?
It was, I think, I got Script of the Bridge in 83. I bought it on cassette. I've still got the cassette. I found it downstairs. And, it was really a phenomenal album. And I think that really opened me up to a more sort of indie sound, a bit more of a harder sound. It was a bit darker. I really sort of, shall we say, I really identified with a lot of the music. Tracks like Less Than Human and Pleasure and Pain. And then, of course, when Strange Times came out, I've got that downstairs as well. Obviously Swamp Thing is, an incredible song from the Chameleons. And really an act that really was, at least in my world, was very obscure. There wasn't a lot of people listening to the Chameleons. In fact, I don't know if anybody was listening to them except me. I didn't know anybody that was listening to the Chameleons. I discovered them, and I do love them. I loved them at the time, and I had them on just the other day. So I'll probably have them on again tonight, now that we're talking about it.
Great shout. First time the Chameleons have been picked for Fantasy Festival as well. They're going to play from 5 till 6, making their Fantastival debut. So 3 acts down, 2 acts left. So get your pre-headline act next. We're going to play from 6:30 to 8 o'clock. So who's going to be your pre-headline act, Stephen?
Bauhaus.
All right. So tell us about, I guess, your love for Bauhaus then.
Well, yeah, I really love Bauhaus. It goes back to sort of, those early 80s, sort of darker, more guitar-driven I actually I found Bauhaus. I bought Burning from the Inside. I've still got it here on vinyl. Some great tracks like She's in Parties, Telegram Sam, and Sanity's Assassin. And just all the tracks that they've done are really great. I mean, I just love Ziggy Stardust. I've got a picture disc here of Bela Lugosi, and it's a glow in the dark picture disc of Bela Lugosi with him as a vampire on the cover or on the picture disc. And it's one-sided, so and it glows in the dark. Bauhaus glows. Sometimes we turn off the lights, and it kind of goes back to that sort of younger, more angst-driven, 14-year-old in me that has gotten a bit mellower over the years, but it's still there. And you know what? I seem to have misplaced my 7-inch copy of Ziggy Stardust, and I've ordered it again. I just want you to know. I ordered it last week. I ordered it again. I had to. I don't know where it is. Somebody might have nicked it. I don't know. The kids may have lost it. I don't know. But I ordered it again, and I'm going to keep playing it. And I found, you're probably familiar with 4AD Records.
Yeah.
And I found my old late 80s Bauhaus 4AD EP. 4AD used to have these sort of EP series that came out, sort of almost like a Peel Sessions kind of series. And I found that one with Terror Couple Kill Colonel on it, but it's got this kind of bizarre electronic remixed version on the B-side that never really got released. And I really love them. And I think that was, again, it sort of goes back to that whole art school, post-punk, and goth wasn't a word then. I don't like that word. It's not a word I like to use. But it's got a harder edge to it, and we'll leave it at there.
Great shout. First time Bauhaus been picked for Fantasy Festival as well. Unbelievable.
It's a fantasy for me,
Mate, absolutely. This is what it's all about. This is what it's absolutely all about. All right, so Bauhaus going to play 6:30 to 8 o'clock. We'll take one more break, and that leaves one more space for your headline act. You're going to play from us from 8:30 to 11 o'clock. So an amazing first 4 acts. So, Stephen, who is going to headline your Fantasy Festival?
I'm going to go back to the Jam. I'm going to go back to the Jam. I remember, I think it was about 81 or so. The Jam had been out for a while, and 81 they were sort of very, very soon to transform into the Style Council. But definitely, we had gotten into two-tone. We were listening to the English Beat, the Specials, the Jam, Dexy's Midnight Runners, all these things, and certainly just a band that I would have loved to have seen, in their day. And, Setting Suns, I think, is the album that I really love. An incredible album. Eaton Rifles is an incredible track. And, obviously I love Paul Weller. You can go through my record collection, and there should be a whole bin that's devoted, it starts with the Jam. It moves into all the Style Council albums, and then it moves into all of Paul's, solo work. And I think he's a phenomenal artist, and it's always been a really special place in my heart and on my turntables for the Jam and everything that Paul Weller does specifically. So, and I don't stop buying it. I never bought Home and Away. Just a couple of weeks ago, I found the Style Council's live album, Home and Abroad. Sorry, not Home and Away, Home and Abroad. And I was singing Home Alone. And I found it. I said, "Wow, I have to buy this. This is fantastic. I never had it." So, yeah, I think the Jam is going to headline tonight.
Great shout. So the Jam headlining your Fantasy Festival. Only the third time they've been picked for Fantasy Festival. So they get spoken about a lot. Weller, obviously a legend. So he and the guys return. They're going to play for 2.5 hours. Then at 11 o'clock, they're bringing back out on stage Bauhaus, the Chameleons, the English Beats, and XTC. And they all get to play one song of your choice, Stephen. So you're standing there, they're all looking at you. You get to tell them what song to play to close your Fantasy Festival. So what song are you going to have them play to complete Stranger Sounds from the Underground?
Well, I skipped over it when I talked about Setting Suns, Going Underground.
Great shout. I guess the clue's in the title of your Fantasy Festival almost.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. I mean, Going Underground is, probably one of my favorite Jam tracks. I'd love to sing it at the top of my lungs. I'd love to be singing it right now, but I'll spare you. And I'll spare you. But, if that would be an incredible experience to see all those bands playing that song. at the very end. That would be amazing.
That would be incredible. All right, so let's lock it in then. So we've got Stranger Sounds from the Underground taking place at the Hollywood Palladium. In your opening act, we've got XTC. Super Seconds, we have the English Beat. In the Midway Madness slot, we've got the Chameleons. Pre-headline act, we've got Barhouse. Headliners, we've got the Jam. And for your encore, all 5 are going to play Going Underground. Sounds like an amazing fantasy festival to me. You happy to lock that one into our Fantastival vaults?
Yeah, I'm very, very, very happy. Thank you so much. It's really great to be here and talk to you.
Oh, incredible. So before we bring this one to a close in, Stephen, you spoke, and we've spoken about Indie Citizens 2 coming out, which I guess is the next release. What's the future hold? I guess anything you can share, anything you've got your eye on, planning on doing?
Well, I think, we're looking at Volume 3. We haven't specifically locked it in yet, but we are looking at it. I'm looking at it. Talking to a few people about it. If anybody wants to give me any words of encouragement, please go ahead. There's certainly some bands that we wanted to get on Volume 2 that, for whatever reason, number one, space, but also number two, timing. That they had a track that wasn't quite ready, wasn't mixed yet, or wasn't quite recorded yet. So there's definitely some bands that we wanted for Volume 2 that could definitely be making an appearance on Volume 3. There's also a couple of indie bands that are out there that haven't released an album yet that I'm interested in talking to them about putting an album out next year in 2024. So I'll still be around. You're still gonna see me. Record Citizens is gonna be here, and it's the end of the year. We got to get Volume 2 out there and get it into people's hands and get it on the turntable and get it in your ears, and then we'll see what next year brings. But we'll be here. We've got some ideas.
Great stuff. So if anyone, again, wants to buy the album, Wax and Beans is the place, right? So you can go into the Wax and Beans store, or you can go onto their website. They're on Twitter as well. And if people want to find you, Stephen, if people have enjoyed what you've got to say and don't follow you, the label is on Twitter, or X, shall we say. So if anyone wants to give you a follow, Stephen, how do people find you?
Yeah, it's on X. At Record Citizens. Also, it's on Instagram, Record Citizens. And that's it.
Great stuff. That is it. Thanks to everyone who has listened to the 148th episode of the Fantastival Podcast. And if you've enjoyed this one, please subscribe. You can give the podcast a review on iTunes, or like I said at the beginning, you can rate the show on Spotify, and you can also comment on each and every individual episode on Spotify as well. So if you get a chance, please do that. Like we've just said, Stephen is on Twitter with the label, so are we. You can find the podcast at Fantastival P. And if you're not on Twitter but want to contact the podcast, you can do so at fantastivalpodcast@outlook.com. Unfortunately, don't play music on this podcast, but I'll get some tracks from Stephen. We'll get some tracks from his chosen acts or anyone who he's mentioned. We'll make a nice little playlist. So if you scroll down in your episode description, you'll be able to find a little link there to a playlist. So, Stephen, you told me you were shy, right? You haven't come across...
I'm a little shy guy. I'm kind of shy about things.
You've done so well on this pod.
Thank you.
You have done extremely well. How have you found it? Because you told me you didn't normally do stuff like this. So I think you've been a great guest. I think people are going to love you on this pod. How have you found being a guest on the podcast?
No, it's been great. Obviously, I love talking to you, and it is very opening and inviting. And Addy told me yesterday. I told Addy I was feeling a little nervous, and he said, once you start talking, the time just flies by. And wow, the time has flown by, and here we are. I don't talk a lot about myself, and I don't really post a lot about myself. I like to post about music and artists and things that I'm interested in, and that's what I'm interested in specifically. And it's kind of nice to sometimes look back and say, well, here's the person behind it. I don't often think about that. So thank you.
No, it's been an absolute pleasure, and looking forward to the record coming out, which will be out by the time this goes out, and seeing the reaction that gets. I'm sure that will get a very good reaction on social up until a very long time to come. Look forward to Volume 3 as well, and seeing kind of the next couple of releases from you. So, like I said, that's it for 148. I'll be back next week with episode number 149. So please make sure to join me. But until then, stay safe, my Fantastival friends. Please continue to spread the word. And that word is Fantastival. Thanks for listening.